Hello, I'm Dr. Frances Rees. I'm a lecturer in law at Essex Law School, and I'm also the founder of the Child Influencer Project, which is a project that spans the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom, focusing on kids as part of the content creation process on social media platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, etc. So the work that I do primarily looks at the child within the screen, whereas a lot of our online safety conversations rightly seem to look at children looking at screens, screen time, and harmful content. Whereas the work that I do is also considering the child within the screen, so as part of the content process. The child could be there through digital parental sharing, also known as sharenting. So that's kind of parents sharing images of their child in cute or funny moments. And that can also escalate into forms of content where brands are involved because the parents and the family accounts will have garnered enough attention that the numbers increase of their viewers, and brands will want to work with families, maybe giving them products and services in return for these performances, and sometimes also escalating into forms of payment. So, what I'm going to do today is introduce you to the project website, which has a lot of resources and information on there for your future reference, as well as introduce you to the digital toolkit that has been developed as part of the research output. So, the project webpage you should be able to see on screen, and that evidences the kind of heart of the project in terms of what the remit would be, looking at children as part of content, and the fact that this is a legal loophole in terms of a lack of protection and regulation within this space. So, what the research does, as I say, is look at this within traditional sharing practices that have escalated over the past 15 years, and then encourage brand involvement, resulting in good services or payments, exposing children potentially to a range of risks that aren't currently covered by existing legislation. And the project wants to work with policymakers to consider what good would look like within this space, as well as inform parents, brands, platforms, and agencies about their responsibilities and rights within this industry. So the project evidences 20 potential risks that I'll work through within the toolkit. And the toolkit was launched on May the 19th in Ireland at the offices of the Children's Ombudsman for Ireland. So the toolkit, as I'll explain, will represent these risk categories through the lens of 6 fictional children that have been developed specifically for the project as a result of the research conducted over the last 3 years. In terms of the website, there is a past events and appearances button and a publications button. So if you click on either of those, you should be able to see a list of publications that have started to stem from the research. So the project has supplied reports for the UN Rapporteur for the sale and exploitation of children, and there's a research article currently underpinning the risk assessment framework that the toolkit sets out. Additionally, in the past events and appearances section, you'll be able to engage with any of the podcasts, immediate appearances that feature the project, where I discuss this in a little bit more depth. So that content is there if you would like to engage with it in more detail. And finally, please feel free to email me or the project email address if you have any feedback or if you want to engage with the project in any more depth. So without further ado, I will introduce you to the toolkit itself. So the Kids as Content toolkit is set out as a safeguarding toolkit, thinking about the child within the screen and thinking about forms of content creation where the child is the focus. Over in the menu section on the left, there is a toolkit guide. So the toolkit guide explores and explains the background to the research, as well as contextualizing some of those key phrases. So, obviously, in terms of what is meant by kids as content, it sets out the meaning of phrases like sharenting and child influencing, giving a little bit more background information there as to those descriptive narratives. There's a few little tidbits there from the research in relation to findings. And also an overview as to why this is a common practice. You know, a lot of people do ask me why parents are doing this, because there is a judgmental aspect to some of this, but parents are sharing images and performance of their children for a variety of reasons, from their own need for contact and their own need for community engagement throughout their digital village, through to situations where parents are experiencing more specific issues within their own parenting journeys or stories. Also, parents thinking about future building or the future career path of for children who have specific talents, are extremely good at sports or hobbies, or can dance spectacularly well. And finally, we see people with their own, audience and their own attention. So some form of social media celebrity, or even traditional media celebrities or personalities, then becoming parents, and maybe setting up separate accounts with their child so that they're not diluting their own brand or their own audience narrative. So the research has been conducted over the last 3 years, from a comprehensive literature review around the literature relating to parenting, as well as child influencer work, and what traditional media would uh, have to do in relation to children working within advertising, stage and screen, etc. We then launched the empirical stage of the project. So the project was launched in the Republic of Ireland and UK last year, in terms of sending out surveys to people within this sphere, asking them to consider their own practices if they'd engaged with any kind of issues whenever they were sharing images, and how they navigated that. So thinking about it from a risk assessment strategy. And project was invited to report to the UN rapporteur for the sale and exploitation of children within digital technologies, and that was submitted as well. So far this year, research paper was published early part of the year, and that underpinning research within that paper sets out really the kind of strategy for exploring this from a risk basis, and moving away from a rights narrative potentially into thinking about this more holistically, and looking at specific behaviours and specific parties that might have and should have responsibility for children. And then the toolkit also sets out what the viewer or the user can do with the toolkit itself. So it explains there are 6 risk categories. They aren't given harms, they're just potential risks. And that's why it's like a risk assessment process that you would see within a standard workplace, such as, how are the hazardous chemicals stored? How are things lifted safely? How is food handled? All of those things. So not a given that somebody's going to hurt their back or spill the bleach, or end up with a food poisoning, but considering approaches in which to make practices safer. And that's the approach taken here with this toolkit as well. So there are 3 categories that seem to focus more, I would say, clearly on potential child labour, or where there's some brand or agency involvement, and those would be financial implications, education, and health and safety. So thinking about, the financial risks to the child in terms of their inability to gain the wage, the financial disparity in power between companies and parents, and the amount of data that's being given out that could expose the child to potential financial fraud or identity theft in the future. Education is mostly about, are they going to school? So attendance, attainment, how are they doing at school or educationally, and appreciation. Is there an appreciation for the value of education and educational commitment? And health and safety, looking at insurance, risk assessments, but mostly working hours. So what hours would the child be working within this if we're thinking about it as an industry? There are three other categories that are kind of broader parenting considerations, so disruptions to the family dynamic, where maybe certain parents view this differently or grandparents might view it differently. Thinking about the identity of the child and their reputation and their views, their privacy, etc., and dignity. So thinking about situations that might be upsetting, might be embarrassing, or might potentially sexualize the child or open them up to AI manipulation. So within each category, these risks are explored through the lens of 6 child influencer accounts that have been created. So those accounts have been created based upon the research that has been conducted to date. And the toolkit is intended as a way to navigate through this and see it from the view of the family and the child involved, as well as what we might see or think of as viewer. So again, if anybody is interested in getting in touch, there are a number of ways of getting in touch with the project. If I go to the menu, after navigating through the toolkit guide, there is a Meet the Children section. So you're able to see the children that have been specifically constructed for the project toolkit, but also based upon a social media mapping of accounts that appear online, as well as through the interviews and observations that have been conducted. So we have Adam, who's our little footballer. We have Bee, who's our little fashion diva. Flick, a future gymnast. Demi and Denise are two naughty twins. Cole is our singer-dancer, triple threat. And Edie is part of the IAD family account. So within each of these accounts, we've constructed not just the pictorial of the child, but also how much imagery, how much information is being shared and how the child is being portrayed through that construction as well. It's also possible to go through and click on any of these categories if you wanted to specifically follow that child and see the issues that they're facing. But apart from if you wanted to conduct your exploration in that way, you could also just go to the specific risk categories within the menu on the left. So the 6 risk categories are outlined on the left-hand side. If we go to health and safety, for example, we can see, as I said, 3 categories of risks are set out at the top. So again, thinking about this as a risk assessment approach. Are there any safety risks for the child that should be assessed as they would be in a workplace? Are you using any equipment? Might the child get too hot or too cold? Are there anything further in terms of training or explanation that would be needed if you want them to do something? Is the child and or the property insured if anything were to happen, because home insurance might be invalidated as this could constitute business activities? And finally, and kind of most importantly, really, how much work is involved in this if the child is staging, learning lines, rehearsing, being propped and prompted, etc., and how is that being logged or monitored? So we can kind of navigate that through the eyes of the child. If we look at Adam here, for example, Adam wants to do a more extreme version of the ice bucket challenge to get money for his football team. And he asks his dad if he can set up the equipment to record him and he'll do it after football practice. Adam has been undergoing tests for ADHD and finds it hard to concentrate. IAD family, they focus on healthy and happy content with exercise and fitness. Dad usually supports with nutty and nutritious, and the mum has built a ninja training course around the back garden with equipment supplied by a fitness company. And the dad has been showing the girls how to blend smoothies and bake nutty oat bars to keep them fueled. So in terms of risk management, again, thinking about this as potentially popular type of content, So in law, we recognize this as the allurement principle, where kids are kind of lured into doing something that others might perceive more as risky, but children might not necessarily understand and see something shiny and want to be involved. So here we have situations where these challenges have gone wrong, and I know there are well reported, unfortunately, incidents of fatalities where challenges have gone wrong. So unlike other industries where children would have a range of risk assessments being conducted with trained professionals supporting that, here we have really kind of parents understanding or needing to know that this is a lure to the child, that they will want to be doing this activity, and that even without supervision, they can decide to do these things. So making sure that they are understanding what it is, informing children about dangers and supervising them where appropriate, and kind of preparing any equipment that you might need, whatever way it shakes out. In terms of insurance, we have the same sort of example again with Edie and her family, and Flick also in her basement practicing gymnastics, but then the house itself is showing a lot of content that has high value goods inside. So, in terms of gadgets, electrical goods, and jewelry. If you think about a child going anywhere else in any other aspect of their life, they would be very heavily insured if anything happens to them, and compensation would kick in. Again, on set or on a photo shoot, that would also be the case. But here, there might be a situation where if these stray into the realms of business activities, home insurance cover might not work. There has been an increase recently in influencer insurance, which is available, but not a lot of parents would know to behave in that way. Again, there have been well documented situations where insurance companies haven't paid out, where people have shared that they're on holidays, leaving their homes exposed to theft, etc. So having to think about that way in which you are advertising to the world at large that that's what's going on within your home. And finally, working hours. So Adam has been going to football practice or training in addition to his content creation commitments. He's running during practice and training, and his dad doesn't get accurate action shots. So there have to be additional shots and recordings where he looks like he's playing football, but there's more deliberate movement. And then he has training on a Saturday, a match on a Sunday. In his spare time, he plays FIFA, which his dad also live streams. B has had a brand direction for a sponsored 30-second reel. She has to say 4 lines of script. She has to wear a specific outfit. She has to use the product and hold it so it faces the camera. She doesn't really understand what's happening. She doesn't understand the words, how to say it properly, and it takes a few days for this to all go to plan. During the recording, B wants to play with it, hits it, breaks it, makes a mess. As any parent knows, that can be a struggle with just standard day-to-day living. So the content takes 12 attempts to record and edit, but as B gets tired and dirty, this has to be done over a few days. So again, child performers in other industries would generally need to apply for a performance license. That would mean that the management of the working hours become the responsibility of the person who has commissioned the performance. And here we have, even successful full-time influencers as adults giving a lot of time away with not any necessary immediate financial gain. It is a full-time job for a lot of people, but a lot of effort goes in to getting returns. If we have children within this industry, it's even more complicated to understand what exactly is going on. Here, even in traditional media, children's rehearsals and preparations, etc., would count as part of the working hours. So while it's, fun to have family activities that involve content and that, there are moments where we're playing to camera, it's also important to find those opportunities to rest and play. Additionally, the research shows that brands will be working, or children and families might be working with a number of brands. So that could increase the workload for a child, where one brand might know the workload involved for their children, child performers, and their families, but where there are multi-brand deals or there are other brands involved with that family, that will involve a variety of commitments for that child that would have to be weighed up. So I've navigated through just one risk category there, health and safety, but it's possible to navigate through any of these risk categories. For example, identity, similarly setting out the dialogue at the top around a question framed about risk assessment practices. Have you thought about it this way? Is this a moment in which you, within your own practice of sharing or influencer activity, would reconsider your approaches to this? And then again, based upon the children's experiences and the family moments, how are you navigating through that? Have you thought about it in this way? Might this be a moment to reconsider aspects that you hadn't considered previously? So I will stop that sharing of the specific aspects. As I said, this is in an initial phase of the toolkit and it's early days, so I do welcome interaction and I do welcome conversation about it. And if anybody would like to know more or have me come in to talk to yourselves about it and develop it further, that would be a fantastic opportunity to really start to have a better conversation about what good looks like in terms of child content on our screens so that the dignity, identity, and privacy of the child is respected, as well as bringing them on par with child performers in traditional media industries. So, thank you very much for your attention. And as I say, please do get in touch if you'd like to know any more.